Eric Toller is the New York Times reporter who helped break that Alito story. Also joining us, NBC's Ryan Riley and Carlos Curbelo, a former Republican congressman from Florida and MSNBC political analyst. So, Eric, what more can you tell us about the display of this flag at Alito's home, and has he had anything to say about it?
Thanks for having me. So Alito was flying this flag last summer, so July, August, and September of 2023. We don't know if the flag was up continuously the entire time, but we do have about, I think, 4 different photos, and actually a fifth that actually surfaced after the report came out. We asked him about this. We asked him about the upside down flag from a week ago, and there he blamed his wife for it. Said it was after a dispute with his neighbors, but he refused to give a comment about this flag.
So he had something to say about the first upside down flag, but nothing about this. Ryan, Trump supporters, I mentioned this, were seen carrying the Appeal to Heaven flag during the January 6th insurrection. Give us a little bit of the historical background on this, though, and how after a really long time in obscurity, it's back.
Yeah, if you really wanted to go back to, John Locke and when this all started, in the 1700s, that's one thing. But in the modern era, it's really been closely associated with Christian nationalism. So that's what we really think of it in that context. Starting with Sarah Palin in the, a decade ago and all the way up to now. It was carried by a number of people who were there for January 6th. It's probably not something that would be unexpected in a crowd with a makeup of this type. There are also lots of Blue Lives Matter flags there as well. So I think the upside down flag in the context of January of 2021 is definitely more of a direct link in terms of January 6th. But this was definitely a feature of January 6th altogether. But more directly, I think speaks to this idea of Christian nationalism being promoted on the lawn of someone on the Supreme Court.
So critics have said, Carlos, that Christian nationalism, signs of it, signs of an attempted overthrow of the government or any implication of support, overthrow of an election, have no place with somebody who is a Supreme Court justice. But former National Security Advisor John Bolton had a pretty fiery response to critics of Alito, and I want to play that.
I think it is outrageous and unacceptable for people to take a flag from the American Revolution and say that because some January 6 protesters flew it, that it's now unacceptable to fly that flag. And I'd like to hear a Democratic Party politician say that expressly.
Carlos, do you agree at all? Is this much ado about nothing?
Look, Chris, I think the irony here is that for conservatives, the ideal Supreme Court justice, the ideal judge, is someone who soberly interprets the law, someone who is not an activist, someone who is simply taking the letter of the law and applying it to modern day questions. And what we have seen both from Justice Alito and Justice Thomas in recent years is a kind of activism, right? Their opinions have been very aggressive, very pointed, and then also there's all this extracurricular behavior that raises questions. So, look, I don't think it's very hard to reach any strong conclusions from any of this, but certainly it injects doubt into an institution that is supposed to be objective, unbiased, and that would hopefully have the support of the majority of the American people because it weighs so heavily on our democracy. So in doing these things, these justices are certainly reducing the credibility of the court.
Yeah, I mean, as you just suggested, this is one in a line of controversies on the court, right? Several of them surrounding Justice Clarence Thomas, also his wife, who denied the 2020 election results. So Senator Dick Durbin is trying to push through ethical standards for the Supreme Court. Even Amy Coney Barrett supports them, but Chief Justice Roberts could not get it done. So what do you think the likelihood is that Congress could actually take some action?
Well, look, I think Congress should at least try, right? The constitutionality of Congress imposing rules on the Supreme Court. I mean, certainly that's going to be controversial and it's going to be contested. But for better or worse, Congress does have its rules, does have ethical standards for its members. Both chambers have ethics committees that regulate the conduct of their members. And really, the Supreme Court should be held to the same standard as the the Congress as the executive branch. It really does seem, ironically, that it's been pretty lawless over there at the Supreme Court for a while. And again, if we want to restore the trust and confidence of the American people in these institutions, the court should either take its own action to regulate the ethics of its members, or Congress should try to do what they can.
So, Eric, you also report that the Appeal to Heaven flag is being flown outside the office of House Speaker Mike Johnson. How do they explain that?
Yeah, Mike Johnson, they pointed to kind of the roots of this flag, because correct that it was started back in 1775, I believe, is when the flag was created and used during the Revolutionary War. But it's been repurposed, and it's pretty naive to think this is purely a nod back to the Revolutionary War. It's been used very heavily by Christian nationalists and other right-wing groups, kind of as a mobilization campaign to bring more of a Christian focus and more kind of Christian lawmaking and interpretation of law. So that's what many have pointed to who have been asked about this. They just point to the Revolutionary War origins of this flag. But it's, a flag is not just a flag, right? It was repurposed heavily in the last decade or so, and it kind of fell out of use for quite a while in the gap between the Revolutionary War and relatively recently.
Eric Toller, one of the great reporters on the New York Times and the investigative unit. Congressman Carlos Curbelo, thank you both.